Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Federal Program Management Professional channel on YouTube. My name is Jim O'Keefe. I apologize. We had some technical difficulties starting out. It's always the joy of streaming. We actually lost some internet service here, so we've been having trouble getting online. So I appreciate you standing by. We're a few minutes late getting started, but welcome. This is the Fed PM Pro channel on YouTube. Our focus is primarily around federal program management, what it's like to be a federal program manager, suggestions and tips and tricks on improving your career and also managing and handling the stresses and daily life of a federal program manager. As I mentioned, my name is Jim O'Keefe. I'll be your host. I've had about 25 years in the federal PM space. I've program managed all kinds of sizes and types of contracts, everything from less than 20 to 300 and even now 730 staff. So I've had a lot of different experiences across the different types of contracts and the different types of work that I've been doing. A lot of mine is in the IT space, so I am very familiar with IT program management. That's my area of expertise. So I'll definitely be discussing from that perspective. But very much looking forward to chatting with you tonight. We're going to be talking about how to jumpstart your program management career. So let's go ahead and get that started. Okay, we always start out here with some quick ground rules, and these are just for to keep things fun and enjoyable. The stream is generally designed to be fun. And so we want to encourage one another to ask questions and have open discussions. We ask that you not be mean. If there are bots or trolls that show up, please ignore them. I'll do my best to get rid of them in the chat if they do show up. And we're just going to ignore any mean-spirited comments. We're here to support one another. So encourage each other and don't be embarrassed to ask any kind of questions. We all started somewhere. So please, ask your questions and we're here to help. My answers, as I mentioned earlier, are based on my personal experiences, which might be completely different from yours. That's great and okay. And as a matter of fact, you might completely disagree with some of my suggestions. If you do, please share yours because I think we can all learn from each other. We all have different experiences. And if you've had a particular experience or want to share some suggestions or tips and tricks, that's what the channel's for. It's for us to kind of share back and forth if we can. And also anytime during the live stream or during the video, if you want to ask a question, you can do so in the chat or after the video is published, you can just put something in the comments. I will read them. And if you've got a specific question, we'll try to make something on that specific question and answer your question in a future video, or we can talk right now. So these videos and live streams are not related to or sponsored by anyone, no employer, no customer, past or present, and the thoughts here are completely my own. So again, I generally will not be discussing things that are sensitive, so won't be talking about personal stuff and generally won't discuss any specifics about a company, contracts, opportunities, agencies, etc. We're just going to keep this a general discussion on program management and help you prepare yourself to be a better program manager. Also, if there's questions that are awkward, I reserve the right not to answer them because we want to keep things fun and enjoyable. So we appreciate you stopping by and I hope that you have a great time and learn something here. Okay, tonight we are going to be talking about how you jumpstart your PM career. I've decided to start using these executive summaries. As many of us know, if we've ever done project or program management, you always have to do executive summaries for your customers a lot of times to allow them to get a quick read and a quick idea of what's going on. So I'm going to include these executive summaries. If you want to pause the video here when you're rewatching it later on, you can literally copy and paste this. This is basically all the comments for the entire video. So you can pause it here, read, and then if you got to go somewhere else, no problem. I understand that, as PMs, our time is extremely, busy. So this is just giving you an opportunity to pause, check out if it's what you're looking for, and you can head out if you don't see anything of interest, or you can stay and hear more about each of these topics. Okay, so when we talk about how to jumpstart your career, I had a previous video on kind of mindset and some of the things that you have to do in a regular job to improve your probability of being able to become a PM. Those included things like being proactive with your managers, offering to do additional work and helping out in challenging projects, those kinds of things. Also, one of the pieces that I mentioned was trying to understand and think in the context of what your manager might need and try to deliver that proactively. Because again, they will appreciate it immensely, and it gives you a better opportunity to interface with your management as you go. So those are always recommended. If you get a chance, you can go back and watch that video on kind of mindset around becoming a program manager or leader. It's true of either one. As you go up the ranks, you're going to, my belief is that you need to kind of have this servant mentality where you're there to help your team succeed and help your customer get exactly what they need and want and what they're going for as far as their roadmap goes. So in that regard, that's the mindset that we're going with, is somebody that is going to be high performing already in the job that they're in, and you want to take the next step. So a lot of times I get questions about, well, if I want to learn, about being a program manager, how do I do that? What, kind of courses should I take? Should I go to college for this? Is there a degree that I can work through? And the answer is kind of yes and no, right? From a degree perspective, a bachelor's degree is a great thing. In the federal program management space, you will see a lot of times, the requisition for a program manager will include it usually includes a couple things. It'll include the, a level of education. It will include specific certifications, which we'll talk about. And a lot of times it also includes experience with similar size and scope types of programs. So if you're just starting out and you're considering getting into this, bachelor's degrees are awesome. And a lot of times that's more than enough to get you where you want to be and get you started in the program management field. A lot of times it's great to have a relevant bachelor's degree. I will say my bachelor's degree had nothing to do with where I ended up. My bachelor's was a double major in biology and botany, if you can believe it. So yeah, nothing even close to what I ended up in. So again, it doesn't really matter sometimes as long as you just have a bachelor's degree to do it. But a lot of times, if you can go into something like public administration, that's helpful. If you can go into a business or technical field that might be associated with what you're doing, like if you wanted to go into, computer programming or network design or something around IT management, if you can get that in a bachelor's degree, it's another great, item to check off. So it should provide basically a foundation, and that's what the bachelor's degree is designed to do. So if you have anything in your degree set that includes things like project management or risk management, those kinds of things, all of those will be positives when a interviewer or a hiring manager is looking at your resume. So get a bachelor's degree. I definitely recommend that. It's harder and harder for program managers to get into these roles without some sort of formal education. So again, there's certainly ways around that with experience and certifications that can get you there. But just be aware, I've seen many, many requirements that include at least a bachelor's degree, if not more. So just be aware you might run into that, and it's best to get started early and get those things out of the way. The master's degree. Okay, so do you need a master's degree? No. There are going to be plenty of program management jobs that don't require a master's degree at all. But they are beneficial, and it will actually, if you have a group of candidates that are applying for a position and you have a master's degree in there above the bachelor's degree with the same amount of experience or the same certifications, a lot of times that will win out when an interviewer is looking at different options. So I have an MBA. I did master's degree work in experimental psychology, but then shifted into an MBA later on because, again, I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to be a program manager. And like I said, it's not required, but if you can get an MBA, that is going to be probably the most powerful master's degree you can get for this particular requirement. And I'll say a couple of things. One is, when I was getting my MBA, they had a program called a master's in, it was like an MSM, Master's of Science in Management. And it was basically the same thing as an MBA, but it's just a slightly different name. I will say that An MBA is far more recognized than an MSM, right? And that the reason that you want to stick with an MBA versus some of these alternative types of things like a Master's of Science in Project Management, that MSPM that you see on the screen too, or even a Master of Public Administration, is that the MBA is generally more easily recognized as this is definitely a business degree, that kind of thing. But again, any master's degree in those spaces is always going to be good and potentially improve your options for getting picked out of a hiring candidate pool. So generally what I'll say is that for your undergrad degree, your bachelor's degree usually takes 4 years. It's not, there's no problem if it takes 5. There's no issues with the time that it takes to get it, as long as you get it. So don't feel bad if it takes 5, if it took 6 or whatever. For a lot of folks, that's an opportunity for you to try out multiple majors like I did, or do other classes to see where your passion lies. So again, just as long as you've got a bachelor's degree, you're in great shape. The master's, the MBA, a lot of times you're able to take it at night while you're working, and you can usually get it in 2 to 3 years. So for example, that's what I did. I already had my job and I was taking evening classes over the course of about 2 years to get my MBA. And that's, I think a lot of us, what I would recommend, if you're able to go straight through, I think that's beneficial. But what you're going to run into is that you're not going to have any on-the-job experience, which a lot of times that's just, as important as having the degree or certifications is experience. So a lot of times it's actually better. Now it can be hard, and certainly there are folks out there, I'm sure, that have kids and are dealing with all kinds of other stuff that's just not going to be possible, and that's okay. Again, whatever works in your life and your time, do that. Again, like I mentioned, master's degrees are optional. So if you can get one, great. If not, then the next step that you want to take is with certifications. All right, so let's talk about certifications. Okay, so in the federal program management space, there are a couple that you're going to see that are absolutely going to show up on almost every requirement for PM, especially when you get into large programs. The first one, I think many of us know. If you don't, this is the number one requirement for a program management position, and that's a PMP. And that's Program Management Professional. It's offered by a company called PMI, and the certifications are all over the place. You'll very easily be able to find it. It is the most common certification for a project and program manager. Again, you can be a program manager and have a PMP, which stands for Project Manager Professional. That's okay. You don't have to have the PGMP, which is Program Management Professional, which I'll get to in a second. So the PMP itself, all right, it is not a super easy exam, right? It's definitely doable, but you're going to need to make sure that you know how to study and know what is best for you as far as how much time you need to study and how long you need to prepare. It is an extensive exam, and there are a lot of folks that don't pass it their first time around. And again, you don't have to pass it your first time around. You can take it multiple times. But I will mention is that for some people, they like to take what's called a boot camp, which would be like 5 days of straight classes. And then a lot of times you could take the exam on the Saturday following that boot camp so that it's fresh in your mind and you've had 5 days of instructor-led training to get you there. Also, you can do a boot camp plus, your own study before you go in and take the exam. So you may do a boot camp 1 week and then take the next week to study and prepare, and then you take the exam. And there are also people that like to essentially go through there's a book that you can get for studying for the latest PMP. You can actually self-study through that whole thing. You can take 6 months if you want, and then you can take the PMP exam and pass it. So again, be aware of how you take tests and what is best for you in your, the time and all that other stuff that you have to worry about, and pick one. Again, like for me, it worked out better to the first time that, was very quick self-study, and then taking the exam on a Saturday, which was great. That worked well for me, and I was able to pass. So, but there are plenty of people that have taken boot camps and they love them. I certainly, when I had a PGMP for a while. I took the PGMP boot camp, and that was super helpful, prior to the exam. So again, those things are extremely helpful depending upon how you study and how you want to learn. So again, follow your best efforts. But almost every PM role that I've been in has had a requirement for a PMP. So again, bachelor's degree, PMP, those two are generally, the two that you see the vast majority of times for a federal program management position. The PGMP is not as common at all. I have seen plenty of folks have it. When you become a program management professional, a lot of times that can mean that you're running multiple projects. Now, when you're a federal program manager, a lot of times your project can be your contract. And your contract can have multiple elements underneath it where you're delivering multiple projects under one program. So the title program manager is most often used when you're delivering a federal government contract, because that program that you're delivering has multiple projects underneath it. It happens a lot. A lot of times you're not just delivering one small facet, although you can, but for larger, more complex like IT programs that I do, you have a cross-functional group of stuff that you're delivering. So you have multiple projects that you're managing underneath, and that can even get more complex the larger the program that you're dealing with. So PGMP is not required. It's certainly a good thing to have. That's kind of like the master's degree. If you have a master's degree in a PGMP, you are more, on paper qualified than a similar candidate that has a bachelor's degree in a PMP. So just keep that in mind. It's another step up in the boxes. Now, the next two bullets that I'll mention here, certified government financial manager. This is delivered by the Association of Government Accountants. This is a good one that I've seen on some folks, and the reason is because it can be really complicated, to deal with financial management in the federal space and also contract management in the federal space. They're very specific. A lot of times they have specific certifications that are required for being able to deliver invoices and those kinds of things for the federal space. So just keep that in mind. That's why sometimes it's good to have a certified government financial manager in your back pocket, and having taken those, because you're better prepared to deliver invoices appropriately and correctly to the government. Any kind of financial management certification is a good thing to have, because it is a big deal. All of us as program managers are going to have to deal with budgeting and accounting and those kinds of things. So having a certification in those areas is always a good thing. Now, the certified defense financial manager. So this is the delivered by the American Society of Military Comptrollers. This again, so when you go into federal program management, there's really two big arms that you can go into. And I'll mention that I have stayed primarily on the civilian side, although now I am working with some Department of Defense contracts. So you can, depending on the agency, right? If it's a military branch, that's the Department of Defense, and they have all kinds of different, usually more complicated standards and requirements for the delivery, not only around things like having particular certifications, but you also generally have to have a higher clearance level in certain situations to deliver Department of Defense contracts. Whereas if you're doing civilian contracts, you may only need like a public trust certification, a public trust clearance. And then you don't need anything like a defense financial manager certification. So again, keep that in mind. If you're going into the Department of Defense, that's why I put the CDFM in here, is that, that's the DoD version of kind of the regular civilian certified government financial manager. So again, anything in management, budgeting, all those things are great things to have, and will bulk up your resume and delivering services. So definitely consider it. Okay. So ITIL. What is it, and do I need a certification in it? And I would say, like I said up here, spoiler, yeah, you are definitely going to want to have an ITIL certification. And why? What even is this? So it's the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. It's kind of a framework of how you deliver services. It's kind of end-to-end for products and services, and has a lot of stuff about continuous service improvement and automation and those kinds of things. But it's a big framework for how you can deliver things like large contracts. Nowadays, it's ITIL 4. That is the latest, and actually there may be an ITIL 5 now, but ITIL 4 is the current one that I've got. And it's the latest qualification. They used to have ITIL V3, which was the version 3 certification. I had that. Now I have ITIL 4. That's exactly how it's denoted. So do you need this? So I would say yeah. And the reason I say yeah is because I've seen it on a bunch of contract requirements too. So getting back to the list, bachelor's degree, PMP, ITIL. Those are a lot of the ones that I see. And this is, again, on the civilian side. Those 3 requirements a lot of times are what you need to get into a program management role. Now, with the new ITIL series, there are 4 different levels of ITIL 4 certification. And honestly, you can just go with foundations, which is fine. As long as you have an ITIL 4 cert, I think you'll be fine. But generally for program managers, the MP version, the ITIL 4 Managing Professional, is a little bit better because this is more designed to how do you manage and operate, a IT services using these kinds of practices. And again, I want to be clear, this is for IT programs that are involved. As you heard me mention in the beginning, I'm an IT program manager. So again, this is specific to my IT friends that are delivering IT services for the federal government. So if you're into some other, program delivery, you won't need this. So this is only for IT delivery of contracts. Make sure you have ITIL in your certification. So I wanted to add this as an addendum. And a lot of times the MP is helpful as well. Okay, and again, there are tons and tons of certifications. If you have one that you've used that has been beneficial for you, throw it in the chat or put it in the comments, and we can add it to the discussion, because it's certainly, like I mentioned, mine is relatively limited to federal program manager. That's primarily delivered in the civilian space and primarily delivered IT services contracts in that space. So again, there's a whole breadth of different types of contracts that can be delivered. So make sure you're aware of what certifications are beneficial in your area. Okay. So additional classes. So on top of degrees and certifications, there are a lot of things that you can do that will be, kind of nice checkboxes to have. They don't necessarily have to be full certifications, but it's always good to have, some of these elements in your back pocket on your resume, and they will, again, help you be more recognized. If it's a head-to-head where you've got 2 bachelor's degrees and 2 PMPs, then somebody has an additional class or additional certification. A lot of times that can bump you up in the order for a hiring manager. So what are some classes that might help? The first one I really do recommend is the FAR, which is Federal Acquisition Regulations. This covers regulations and policies for federal acquisitions. And if you're a federal program manager, that's what you're delivering. You are replying to and operating within a federal acquisition. So keep that in mind. The FAR is something you are going to constantly deal with and need to be familiar with, because any contract that you get in the federal space is going to have Federal Acquisition Regulation FAR clauses that apply to that contract, and you're going to need to understand them, and you're going to need to know what they mean and how you stay compliant with them. So a FAR course is great. Also, you've heard me mention previously that there are situations in which you could even do a government contracting course or government contracting certification. Those are fantastic, because what I mentioned previously is government contracts are set up a very specific way. And if you're able to take a course around it, you're going to understand better the process of how you go from a government request for proposal or request for information, and what those even mean and what they are, and then how do I respond to it, and all of those types of things. And it'll give you a good foundation around how government contracts operate. And that's something that I wish I had had when I first started. I did get it as I was going through the process, but I wish it was something that I'd gotten up front. And same thing with like FAR certification. They're not required. Again, like I went into government contracting with relatively small contracts, but I didn't have either of those to begin with, but it was more of a learning curve, and I wish I had had them up front. Courses in data analysis are really great. Statistical techniques, a lot of times, especially in the IT field, we have a lot of metrics that have to be calculated around the service delivery and those kinds of things. So having an understanding of statistical analysis is a great thing. A lot of times that can help you, provide better reporting, analysis, more, everybody likes data analytics. from a dashboarding perspective. You like to deliver these really nice, pretty dashboards that can go to your customers so they can have a single pane of glass to look at, to get information about their, IT environment. All of those things, statistical analyses techniques are always great there. Just in, data visualization, big data, any of those pieces are going to be super great. The last piece here is leadership and management. And there are tons and tons of courses around this. There are a lot online too, and as you've heard me mention before, you can even use YouTube. I mean, YouTube has got tons and tons of really good content, and as a matter of fact, you can get stuff from like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, Harvard. They have classes literally completely online and available to you at no charge. So again, look around if you don't want to go through the process of getting a certification. And again, these classes, a lot of times they can vary from just a couple $100s to several thousand. They can be a single day kind of overview, or they could be 5 full days, which would provide a deep dive, and you may end up with a certification at the end of it. So keep that in mind. These are just broad ideas of some of the additional classes that might help you. And the last one, this is kind of a bonus that I wanted to mention, is that nowadays AI is going to be a critical piece that you're going to need as a program manager. You're going to need to at least understand it. If you've seen some of my previous videos on ChatGPT and the coming AI evolution, you really need to have at least some understanding of how that's going to work. From an IT perspective, we certainly need to know, because things like chatbots are going to be big. Also, AI analytics, AI operations, which does predictive analytics and kind of predicts how things like networks or telecommunications or IT services are going to react, and kind of proactively help to resolve issues and things like that. So again, AI is going to be used all over the place. It would behoove you to get some background information on it. Again, you can get a lot of that from YouTube or keep track of it, but they also, I went to a basic understanding of AI for managers course from MIT. And again, that was an online course, and I'd recommend it. It was great. Lots of good information, and it gave me a structured understanding of, like, for a manager, what do I need to know about AI? I don't need to know all the, technical capabilities underneath it or the models or anything like that, but I do need to know, a basic idea of how and what it does, and then how it can be implemented to deliver services to a customer, which I think is great. So again, getting ahead of the curve, particularly now, we're in the wave, right now of AI, and it's just going to continue on. So highly recommend that. Now, the last thing I wanted to chat about was, a lot of your companies will pay for training. And depending on the company, this may be widely, published or not so much. And you, in the previous, one of my previous, the one on mindset, I did talk about, you have to proactively go and get this training. You have to, sometimes bug your managers or see if that benefit is available to you, and use it every year and max it every year, so that as you're coming up, you're using it for certifications and classes. If you do basically what I've outlined here, over the course of a couple of years, you can have all the certifications you need, and you'll be ready to embark on your program management career, and you'll have the experience underneath you to also be able to potentially qualify for smaller programs and get started. So again, always use the training budget that your company offers. And if you're in school and you haven't started all of that, no problem, continue through your bachelor's degree. A lot of times, again, you can finish degrees through your company. So if you don't feel like having, the pain of student loans that we all have, sometimes you can actually get started with an IT company, and you can use some of your stipend for training towards a bachelor's degree. So you could literally get a bachelor's degree while you're working. I will say there's a bigger challenge with that than a master's degree, because there's a lot more credits for the bachelor's degree. As many of you probably know, 130 or more credit hours are usually required for a bachelor's degree, and each class is usually 3 to 4 hours. That gives you an idea of how many classes you need to take, whereas a master's degree is probably 35 or something like that. Again, don't quote me on the exact numbers, but it gives you an idea. One is 4 years, to complete, and the other one can be 2 years, and those are classes taken, after work. So again, my recommendation for you to jumpstart and get your career going is to start now. So for me, one of the things that I was really glad I did was, yeah, some of this stuff is a pain. And I will say that there are sacrifices that we all have to make. I was very lucky in that I had support from my spouse during this process, because we had a daughter, and that was hard, not spending time with her and having to take these courses. And at the same time, my wife was going through her degree process. So it was, if you can imagine, a family that has a child and both adults are trying to swap back and forth to deal with classwork, there were obviously sacrifices that needed to be made. And you have to look at that yourself and figure out what's important and what's critical at the time. Going back, it was hard. And I do wish I had more time, to have spent with my daughter. So, it's kind of this balancing act. But I do think that if you are, have an opportunity to do it while you're on the job, and you're okay with sacrificing a couple nights a week to get that process started, it will be done before you know it. I mean, that's the really important part. Is it feels like, oh my gosh, I can't, 2 years is an eternity. But literally, as soon as you're in it, it's going to go by in a blink of an eye, and you'll be finished, and you'll have this huge big checkbox ready for you to, start your career and get working in the program management space. So again, these are the kinds of things that I recommend. Going into a basic, PM role, generally recommend a bachelor's degree and a PMP, Program Management Professional Certification. All the other stuff is added bonus. So if you want to get a master's degree, I generally recommend a master's degree either in the area that you're going into to be a project manager. So for example, if you were project managing a project that was based in the Department of Agriculture for the federal government, it might be beneficial to have a biological sciences background in your undergrad or master's degree. So again, make sure you do the research on the program that you're going after, so that you can, again, kind of tailor your goals and your degrees to the areas that you want to be in. And then, as I mentioned with the certifications, for IT-based contracts, you definitely want to have an ITIL certification. For others, it does help to have some sort of government financial training or certification, as well as maybe a government contracts class that you've had an opportunity to go through. And then any class that relates to the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the FAR, always great to have. Okay, so I think that has wrapped up all of the different ways you can jumpstart your career. So hopefully this is helpful. If you have any questions about how this process works, additional ideas around classes or things that you want to know about, please feel free to put them in the comments. If any of this has helped you, please consider subscribing. As I mentioned each time, I generally do these on Thursday nights as a live stream, and then they will show up as a video on the channel. And we go through a whole bunch of different topics, everything from something like tonight, which gives you some background of how to get started as a PMP, all the way up to things like emerging technologies. We talked about ChatGPT a couple times already. We also talked about mental stresses and some of the challenges that program managers face. So those the topics will continue to evolve. And if you have any specific questions that you'd like to have addressed, again, please feel free to place them in the comments, and we'll try to address them in a future video. So again, if you liked what you've seen, please consider liking and please consider subscribing, and we will see you in the next one. Good luck.